This particular incident I'm about to describe happened a couple of years ago at a bar my friend and I frequented weekly. Looking back on it, I realize now how much danger we were in and how fortunate we were to come out unscathed. Also, I apologize in advance for how long this is. I tend to be very detailed in my storytelling. So before I get ahead of myself, allow me to rewind to a couple of hours before this incident. It was a few hours before my friend had to go into work, and we had plans to grab a few drinks before she hit up her shift at a local bar. I had just arrived at our house, and we were on our regular walk to the bar. Note, not the same one she works at, which is not by any means a long distance, but does involve weaving through some shady areas and a dark trail that we sometimes take when it's still light outside, and there's enough of us that we can handle ourselves. This night, though, it was just me and my friend, and it was very dark, so we took the longer way. I remember thinking how menacing the moon looked as it glowered an eerie orange in the night sky. Premonition, maybe? Probably not. I'm just a very observant girl. We made it to the bar safe and sound, and we're in the middle of ordering our drinks when a group of 9 men, all decked out in business suits, entered the room. Upon second glance, we noticed they had a woman with them. She was young, appeared to be in her early 20s, and unlike the men, whom were dressed like they were about to sit down for a business conference, she was dressed in casual jeans and a t-shirt. This was the first detail I noticed that seemed odd to me, but I shrugged it off. I didn't know them, and it wasn't my business. As far as I was concerned, they were just a group of businessmen who'd just come back from a long and probably very boring conference, and now were just unwinding for the rest of the night. The woman was probably a friend of theirs that met up with them along the way. No big deal at all. Still, they stood out like a sore thumb, and every so often we would look over at them to find they were already staring in our direction. Okay, fine. They probably just sensed we'd been paying closer attention to them than normal. We paid them no more attention, and chattered amongst ourselves about the things we usually do: work, our social lives, our love lives. Nothing that anyone would find to be of great interest. I tuned out of our conversation, though, when I felt the men's eyes on us again. My ears perked at the mention of a few notable key words. 2 girls, very pretty. Want the blonde. My stomach clenched. If they were talking about us, I was definitely the blonde girl. My friend's hair is as dark as night, and me, just the opposite. With the way they were looking over at our table, I knew they meant us. Needless to say, I was instantly uneasy at the idea of 9 random men talking amongst themselves in hushed voices about me and my friend. Then, to my dismay, the woman of the group came over to our table. This caught my friend's attention too, and her eyes scanned the woman with an expression that mirrored my own. The woman smiled brightly at us, instantly giving off a friendly vibe. Too friendly. I hope this doesn't come off as creepy, but I just wanted to tell you that you girls are absolutely beautiful, she said. Thanks, I said, instantly wary. My friend nodded a thanks too, barely looking at her, but she too looked uneasy. The woman seemed to take this to mean an invitation to sit with us, because that's exactly what she did. Before I realized what was happening, she had scooted into the booth to sit right next to me. "See those guys over there?" she said, pointing at the table of men from which she had come from. "Yeah?" "Well, they have been wanting to talk to you girls from the moment they saw you both, but, you know, they are really shy. So they asked me to come over here and talk to you for them." That's nice," I said, completely baffled by how weird all of this was. "If they want to talk to us, though, they could have just come over here." "I told you, they're shy," she said, and then giggled like a schoolgirl that made her seem younger than she was. Yeah, I thought, all 9 of these fully grown men were surely too shy to talk to a couple of young 20-something-year-olds. "See the cute dark-haired one with the beard on the far left?" she asked, pointing to one of the men at the table that fit that description. "He's been dying to ask you out," she said to me, and then pointing to another guy, she proceeded to gush to my friend about how he was interested in her as well. When we didn't look as enthused as she'd expected, she prattled on about how she'd known these men all of her life and how sweet and trustworthy they were, and that we just had to take her word for it because she's a girl too, and she has our backs. Something like that. Yes, how very convenient that the supposedly sweetest guys of the group had an eye on each of us respectively. I fought the urge to roll my eyes at how obvious a setup this was. I waited impatiently for her to just cut to the chase and get to the proposition she had clearly come here for. "I know this must look to you girls, and you're probably used to this all the time. I totally get it. I would think the same thing. Us girls have to look out for ourselves, right?" Yes, she actually had the nerve to say this. "You seem like smart girls. It's good to have a head on your shoulders, but you have nothing to worry about. I've known these guys since we were children, and they wouldn't harm a hair on anyone's head, much less 2 pretty girls like yourselves. More flattery, more grooming." I had to hand it to her. This girl was a crafty manipulator. She was telling us everything a girl in our position would want to hear, playing the female ally card to gain our trust. It was becoming blatantly obvious that the role this woman played in this man's agenda, a female pursuer, would seem less threatening to 2 young girls. I was disgusted. Anyways, the guys and I are about to leave for... You can come your own way and meet us there if you're more comfortable. They totally understand. They're totally gentlemen. I bet. Don't worry, they'll pay for everything. Final red flag unleashed. This was far shadier than the motives of your average pickup artists. My friend and I shared a look of bewilderment from across the table, and then nodded in understanding as we came to an unspoken agreement as to how to deal with this situation. "Well, we appreciate it, and tell them we really are flattered," my friend said politely, with the fakest smile I've ever seen her muster plastered on her face. "But we're just leaving." The girl frowned, not even bothering to hide her disappointment. "Why? Where are you girls off to?" My friend shot her a look of annoyance, clearly put off by this woman's nosiness, but she said, "I have to work in 30 minutes. This actually wasn't entirely a lie. My friend was due to come into work, but not for a few hours." And this is when the girl's demeanor changed. Gone was the personable and sweet girl, trying to be our friend to reveal a fucking snake. I'm not even exaggerating. In seconds, this woman transformed before our very eyes into a stone-cold predator. She was still speaking in the same friendly and polite tone, but her smile had twisted into a sneer and her eyes had narrowed into beady slits as she glowered at my friend. "How much?" "What?" my friend asked, completely baffled. "How much would you be making tonight?" she asked, although it sounded more like a demand than an inquiry. My friend divulged the amount. The girl nodded and then walked off. We thought that was the end of it, and we breathed a sigh of relief. We could see she looked like she was conferring with her comrades about something, and then, before we could move a muscle, she was walking back towards our table, looking more menacing than ever now. She took a seat next to me again. "What if I told you we would pay you twice the amount of money you'd be making tonight if you come party with us?" she asked. "I'd say that's cool, but like you guys would do that anyway," my friend said with a strange smile. The girl grinned, taking out her purse and pulling out the fucking fattest wad of cash, dumping it on the table in front of us. Our jaws dropped. "This is thrice the amount you'd be paid tonight," she said. She even counted it for us. Now we knew something was terribly wrong, and that her male friends weren't just pickup artists or even rapists. This was a business conference after all, just a very different kind. "Okay," my friend blurted out. I shot a look at her that read something like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But she insisted that we go with them and that it would be fun. Here I was worried that I would have to do some serious damage control when she said, "We'll go. I just have to go to the bathroom and freshen up." Oh, the woman seemed pleased with this. And smiling, she put the money back in her purse and walked back to the table. One of the men looking over at us smiled and waved. We jumped up from our seats and practically raced to the direction of the washrooms, which is in a hallway right around the corner that would conceal us from their prying eyes. As soon as we got the chance to talk, we shared the same thought that these people were running a sex trafficking ring, and we needed to get out of here now. Our plan was to take the back exit, which was further down the hall from the bathrooms, but after some deliberation, we considered that the woman might be onto what we were really planning and would be waiting for us on the other side of the door. The back door also led into an alley, and we agreed that, especially in a situation like this, it was far too risky. As luck would have it too, her phone was temporarily out of service and mine was dead. We decided that we would have to enlist a staff member's help. We walked back to the table and told them that we'd be going with them just as soon as we order our drinks. One of them offered to get it for us, but we were already power walking over to the bartender. We told him everything. They must have noticed we were talking with him for longer than was necessary to order a few drinks. And thank God they booked it out of there. All the same, the bartender told us not to go out there as they might be waiting for us outside, and that he'd call a cab for us to make sure we got home safely. Thankfully, while our cab arrived and we stepped outside, half expecting them to jump out of the shadows and conk us over the head with bats, there was nobody in sight. We hurriedly climbed into the cab and took it back to her place. I'm fully convinced that if we had agreed to go with them, we'd have been drugged and sold into the sex trade. I'd probably be holed up in some prison somewhere across the world right now. The suits, the business-like nature of their meeting, the woman they sent over to gain our trust, the bribery. This was some seriously shady shit. The final nail in the coffin, though. A week later, a girl from the area was declared missing, and her body was found dumped in a creek outside of the city a month after this incident. Apparently, the last she was spotted was in that fucking area of town. I don't know if there's any connection to these two events. They very well could have nothing to do with each other. I can't help thinking there was. Edit. In my recollection of this event, there was a specific detail I forgot to include in this story. In addition to the woman trying to lure us away with temptations and playing the female ally, one of her other games was pulling the lone female card by trying to guilt us into going out with them on pretense of her being the only girl in the group, and how boring her night would be if we didn't go. It's a small detail, but it uncovers yet another layer of manipulation she had used to try to get us to come with her. Of course, that tactic didn't work on us either. Thought I would include it for completion purposes, as I just now remembered that specific part of it. 2. I've only ever talked about this with my best friend. I was with 2 other girls when the creepiness went down, and the 3 of us haven't discussed it since. To set the stage, I was 22 and my friends were 19 and 21. Their names were Kate and Kath respectively. We're all female and under 5'5", all pretty slim. First, a little background. I've been lucky enough to take martial arts-based self-defense classes since I was about 6, and have since taught several of these same classes to little kids. It's all about not being an easy target. This includes learning to shout very loudly. Kids get excited when I tell them to start swearing and screaming if a stranger is threatening them. This really throws off would-be attackers. Running away, keep up with your cardio, and if they can't run away, how to hit correctly and use the other person's momentum and weight to get them on the ground, so they can then run away to safety. I never had to use any of this in real life before my first weekend in London. I'll set the stage. 1 year ago, my American university hosted a study abroad program in the Netherlands. About 3 weeks into our semester, the 3 of us decided to take a long weekend in London. On the first day we were there, we walked around the city a bit. We went to a knitting shop called Loop. As we were leaving Loop and planning our next couple of hours, a skinny, kinda raggedy and dirty looking guy, probably in his late 20s, started shouting, "Smile! Come on girlies, smile! You're so pretty!" at us. Kate, the more outspoken of us, spun around and said, "No." The man just grinned at her and held up his hands and said, "Nothing happened. See you later," and walked off. This was weird and made me extremely uncomfortable. But we figured he was just a little crazy and misogynistic. We headed back to our hotel to change, then got on the tube again and headed toward the West End. Tons of people piled onto the tube with us, shifting around and finding spots. I pressed my back against the far wall. I'm a pretty paranoid person, and I prefer to be as quiet and observant as I can in crowded spaces, especially if I'm with other people. I automatically turn into the parent friend. I noticed 2 guys, both tall. They were around 6 feet, maybe a couple of inches taller, and skinny with really baggy clothes on. Watch us for the entire tube ride. One of them was the guy from outside of Loop, who had been telling us to smile. I'm shaking because I realize that either A, he recognizes us from before, or B, he's somehow been following us and now has another person with him. were all fairly attractive young women, so it made sense that some guys would look at us. But these guys gave me a seriously bad vibe, and my adrenaline was starting to really build. What we thought was our stop came up. We were all new to the tube system, and I started moving off of the train with my friends a few steps behind me. The two guys got off at our stop too, as we walked, both of the other girls still talking loudly. I kept glancing over my shoulder. Sure enough, the guys were still almost directly behind us as we exited the station. The friend of the man from earlier had his hand under his shirt, near his waistband. Never a good sign. The street we'd walked onto was surprisingly empty, and I realized that we'd accidentally gone a stop too far. One of the two guys, still behind us, started asking us where we were going. All of us stayed silent and kept walking towards a better lit area, ahead and around a corner. He kept asking us questions, where we were headed, why we were dressed up, if we were meeting boyfriends, where we were from, etc. The three of us ignore them until one decides to yell, "You got a great arse, blue dress. How about you bring it back over here?" At Kate. She stops walking and turns to face the guys. She gets out a faint "What are you?" before she realizes that one of the guys was the same one from earlier in the day. She and Kathy totally freeze. The guys start laughing, like laughing, not just chuckling, and walking closer to us. There weren't a lot of people around, but there's a fairly main street close by, and I can hear people talking and walking around. I want to run, but my friends are scared and aren't moving an inch. I can't leave them behind. They keep asking us the same questions as before, but none of us answer. The man we'd seen before starts getting angrier and angrier, saying things like, "Fucking disrespectful, aren't you? You need to learn to be a little nicer. Fucking American bitches, always so rude. We'll teach you to ignore us like that." The man behind him is laughing, walking forward with him. So I do the only thing I can think of. I would crazy them. I'm terrified, but I walk in front of my paralyzed friends with the most wild-eyed, insane look I can muster up, and just start shouting at these guys in what I hoped sounded like a Russian accent. I'm terrible with accents, so it probably just sounded vaguely Eastern European. And just losing my shit as loudly as I can. "Disgusting men, leave us alone. I'm not afraid to kill a man, I'll do it. I don't give a fuck, I hope everyone in London sees you bleeding." Of course, I'd only been in one gym class fight back in 5th grade, and I'm not really a violent person at all, but hey, they don't know that. I kicked off my shoes and pulled up my bag in front of me. Now there was absolutely nothing besides a cheap wallet and a passport in my purse, but I opened it anyway, keeping my eyes locked on the guy closest to me, and start rummaging through it as if I do have a weapon. The whole time I'm screaming very loudly at them and swearing for every other word. Just a moment after I put my hand into my bag, the guy sprinted away, backs to us, and my friends and I ran in the opposite direction, onto the main street nearby. Thankfully, nothing physical actually had to happen with the two men. I can spar really well, but I don't know how I do with basically zero help against two guys who were much bigger than me. Where we were turned out to be only about a block from our theater. We went inside very quickly. My friends didn't say anything about it. Actually, none of us talked for the rest of the night. I think I freaked them out a little bit, but I'd rather them think I'm a little crazy than all of us be hurt, or worse. I do plan on going back to London one day, but creepy dude who follows us through London and brought a friend. Let's not meet. Lessons. 1. Always pay attention to who's around you, especially in a foreign country. 2. If you're being crept on in public using a loud confrontational voice and tons of bad language, will usually scare off anyone trying to take advantage of you, and will let other people around know that something not that chill is happening. If that doesn't work, go for the eyes, nose, and groin first. 3. This happened around March 2008. I had recently split from my crazy ex, Bob, with whom I had children. I was living in my own apartment. Bob had moved to the next town, and life was good. I was pretty jumpy when it came to people knocking on my door, as it usually meant Bob was drunk, on drugs, and convinced I had a man at my house, doing God knows what, in front of his kids, and was on a mission to kill this manifested man. Because God forbid I find happiness, or even for pretenses. So yeah, that crazy. I lived in a very small Texas town of about 2,200 people. Almost no crime to speak of. And people don't lock their doors. I figured with him being in the next town I didn't have to worry, and so was a bit more lax about locking my door. On this night, I worked late and didn't end up going to bed until about 1 a.m. As it happened, the foot of my bed was about 3 feet from the front door. I had a day bed that looked like a couch, so it wouldn't be so obvious that my bedroom was also my living room. I was all toasty and comfortable. Then I remembered I didn't lock the door. Of course, I'm way too comfy to get up. I'd just fallen asleep when I heard rustling outside my door. I froze until I heard my screen door open and the doorknob being turned. I bolted up just in time to slam and deadbolt the door, and assuming it was Bob, yelled, "Go away." He said, "It's Daniel, I'm looking for Bob." I explained that I didn't know anyone named Daniel, and that Bob doesn't live here. He kept insisting I did know him, and that he'd met me at my dad's. This was even more alarming since my dad lived 8 hours away and nobody in that town knew him. He said he needed to talk to me, changing his story to basically wanting to offer me comfort. Throughout this, he's still knocking and trying the doorknob. I pretended to cry and talk about my messy breakup to divert him from trying another way in. I got the phone, put it on pulse, so the keys wouldn't make a noise, and dialed 911. I quietly told the operator what was happening and held the phone to the door, so she could hear this guy once again banging on my door, trying to coax me into letting him in. The operator says someone's on their way, so I hang up and call my father-in-law. He shows up before the cops, surprise, with my brother-in-law, and confronts the guy. I felt safe enough to open the door and was hoping I might see this guy get his ass kicked. Right then, the cop strolls over and asks what the problem is. This is when the guy walks away. He says, "Thanks for calling the cops." The cop watches him walk away and announces he wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The cop says he's just a nuisance and he does this to people from time to time. The best I could do was get a no trespassing order, which means little more than a piece of paper handed to you by a cop. As it turns out, I had met the guy once, 3 years previous at my mom and stepdad's house. He was dating my friend and she brought him over as a double date movie night. He seemed a little slow and actually made a touchy-feely pass at my BF. My friend broke things off shortly after because he was becoming really creepy, and I didn't see him again. so completely forgot he existed. Very faint silver lining to Crazy Ex-Bob. He saw Daniel shortly after, punched him in the face a couple of times, and told him exactly what he would do to him if he ever came near me or my kids again. I saw him around sometimes, and was as vile as I could be, refusing to wait on him at the convenience store I worked at. I made sure everyone knew why. He would just roll his eyes like he thought I was joking. He ended up going to jail for statutory rape of his girlfriend's 12-year-old daughter, and gave them both syphilis. To be honest, I think he was probably intellectually slow already, and drugs just amplified the crazy. I don't know how he knew where I lived, but I couldn't stop shaking at the thought of what would have happened if I didn't happen to have such an unconventional sleeping situation, and had panic attacks when people knocked on my door after. I got very lucky, and I always make sure the doors are locked before I go to bed. I'd also like to stress the importance of keeping your wits about you in situations like this. Sometimes that's your only defense.